I am excited to welcome my first guest in this morning. He is, candidly, he's a friend. Peter Costa, who I've gotten to know over the last decade or so as he has made his way from the rough and tumble streets of New York City to Oxford, Mississippi on a nearly annual basis. He is a former governor at the New York Stock Exchange, former market analyst on CNBC, and despite the fact that he is a fan of the Tennessee Volunteers, he is an all-around good guy. Peter, good morning, and welcome to the show.
Oh, Richard, thank you very much for having me. And I wore this particular shirt in honor of the fact that the Vols are probably going to end up in the Final Four. And, I'm not alone. I didn't just do that, just one thing. I brought my Ole Miss hat as well, because I think
You've got it balanced.
I have to balance it, and I think that Ole Miss has a good shot, which is very surprising because I didn't think during the season Ole Miss did all that well, but they look great in the tournament. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you for having me.
Ole Miss and Tennessee played in the regular season. I don't know if you remember that. It's kind of late in the year.
Yeah, I remember that game, and I remember throwing my phone across the room and getting text messages from several people in Oxford about that particular game. And I look past that. You know what? It's all about the tournament, and playing Kentucky this week, so we'll see what happens. And
that's right.
Rebels should. I mean, it's going to be a fight. I got to tell you, it's going to be a fight, but the Rebels should do okay.
We will see how that goes. I'll get started tomorrow night. Peter, there are certain titles in life that you carry forever. Like if you win a Heisman Trophy, you are forever Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Danny Werfel. If you are a former president, you are always former President Jimmy Carter. Rest his soul. Is that the same thing when you are a former governor at the New York Stock Exchange? Are you always Governor Peter Costa? Do you sign your name that way?
No. I don't sign my name that way. But generally, I think it helps, whenever you do media, people automatically, I guess it clicks in their head that there's somebody coming on that's relatively intelligent, has some experience in that particular field. And, I don't, other than, being on this show or being on a couple of other radio shows that I do, I very rarely even think about it. But, it was prestigious, I guess. I'm trying to be humble here, if that's even possible.
What is a governor? What is a governor at the stock exchange for people that don't know what that means?
Well, when there's different times in the exchange's history, governors were much more important. Going towards where we are now, they're really, with electronic trading, there's not a lot of things for a governor to do. But when I was a governor, there was open outcry. So you would trade with other brokers. You would verbally trade with another broker. And sometimes there would be disputes between the two brokers about what was said, the transaction that took place. And as a governor, I had to mediate that particular. This was just one of the functions. I would mediate disputes between brokers. Also, if there were breakout situations in stocks, my job, instead of being a broker for my clients, I had to drop that and become almost like a policeman in a trading crowd, a very active trading crowd. And, it took away from my business a little bit, but not that much. I mean, there weren't that many opportunities for that to happen. But if there was a breakout, news out on a stock during the trading day, they would expect a governor to be in there to try to at least keep calm and make sure that the rules were being upheld. So that were the two main things. And then there were, situations where market makers would have, indications on stocks where a stock was going to open up or down a significant amount. Governors were supposed to be responsible for helping price where the stocks opened or closed. So if there was an imbalance, I had to be in there to make sure that, all the players that were involved were satisfied and that the price was legitimate. And if sometimes, a stock would open down $10 or $20, and that's a very significant move, regardless of what the price of the stock is. So you had to be aware of everybody involved and making sure that it opened at the right price and within a timely manner, which is not easy. So, there were certain things you did that were important. But overall, it was, it's a good, moniker to have, I guess, for your show anyway.
Sure. I want to ask you about this. There are a lot of different things I want us to get into this morning, but one of the things, and Lance, who you visited with when you came on just a second ago, producer who does a phenomenal job. He makes it all happen behind the scenes. He has harped on this. This has been an issue for him for a long time. It's something that people talk about as well, and that is members of Congress and their portfolios. By virtue of the jobs they have, members of Congress have information that the American public, the general stock trading public, is not necessarily privy to, and yet it is not illegal for them to invest based on some of that information. And they can't share it. They can't pass it along. You can't have the whole inside trader stuff in theory, but we see net worths of longtime legislators that have ballooned exponentially despite a $225,000 or so salary. How much concern did you have or do you have about that as a financial analyst and a former trader?
Well, you know what it is? To me, there's two sets of rules. There's the rules for you and I, and then there's a set of rules for Congress. And there shouldn't be. They should be under the same guidelines and restrictions that you and I have. And I've always felt this way you could go back 50 years. I don't think, they make the laws. So they make the laws that suit them and have, somewhere buried in a 500-page document, there's something in there that exempts them from insider trading laws, and I think that should be corrected. There's a lot of things about Congress that should be corrected, but to correct it, they have to correct it. And, if you're a congressman and you have the ability to trade over time and make a serious amount of money, like Nancy Pelosi, I don't want to bring her up. I mean, it's a frightening thought to even think about her. But if you think about today, is it really?
It really
wow.
is.
All right. Well, happy birthday.
She's 138 today.
In dog years. No, she, but you look at her track record is pretty damn good. And she should not have that advantage, and that's the whole reason that insider trader laws were enacted, was to prevent people who had knowledge of something that would be significant, not allow them to act on it. They can't trade on information that they have that no one else has. But
so an example of that would be if you're on a board of directors of a company and a terrible earnings report is on the way, or that there is an acquisition that is about to happen that the market is not going to view favorably, you don't have the ability legally to dump a bunch of your stock before that happens. However, if a member of Congress knows that something like that is coming, they can quietly dump their stock and not take the hit. Is that what you're talking about when you're,
yes.
Rules for me, not for thee?
Right, 100%. Because of legislation and the amount of money that the federal government spends, there are a million committees that they know that they're going to be appropriating dollars to a certain industry. Now, if you look at the industry, and you look at the 5 biggest players, they're going to benefit from that particular piece of legislation. They go out and buy those shares, and when the legislation passes and the word gets out that, company A is going to be getting $500 million contracts, stock goes up, 25%. That's insider trading as far as I'm concerned. She may not have been in the board. Yeah. She may not have been. Sure. You want to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break. Well, we've got more with Peter Costa coming up. By the way, who knew that Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, was giving us all an insider trading tip last week? When he poo-pooed Tesla, all of a sudden the stock went up. Did you capitalize on that? I don't know. Mornings with Richard Cross. We're back with Peter Costa after this. Back with you, Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm, SuperTalk TV, available to you as a podcast. You can listen on demand. We want to make life as easy as possible for you to be a part of the conversation, to be informed, and to hear this conversation with Peter Costa, former market analyst at CNBC, former governor with the New York Stock Exchange. And let's kind of go rapid fire on some topics. But before we do that, you have a most days daily newsletter that you send out. It is a mix of market analysis and political analysis and some opinions and the occasional Tennessee Vols reference. How can people get that?
Well, Richard, it's on an app called Substack, which is basically a free writer's. If you write and you want to write and post something like a blog, you can go on there and do it for free, and they will support you up to a point. And it's called Costa's Corner. And if you go on Substack and type in the search Costa's Corner, it should come right up. And generally what I do is on Monday will be business. But, with business, it's weird because I originally wanted to just keep it strictly business on Mondays, but because of politics, they meld almost together. It's almost like one is involved in the other and the other is involved in one. So Monday becomes more of a political business or business political, and then Wednesday is all politics. And, I try to be fair. I mean, I'm a conservative Republican, but I don't think everything that, the Republicans.
You're not a right-wing nut job.
No, I'm not. I'm not a MAGA Republican, but I do believe that if you look at what Republicans stand for and how they want things to run, I follow that vein more than I would follow any Democratic vein. Yeah. And I think that, but there are certain things, if there's a Democrat that actually will listen, and I think there's one in Congress that does listen out of how many Democrats there are in Congress, there might be one Democrat in the United States that listens because most of them don't. But anyway, I'm just, I think John Fetterman actually, originally I thought the guy was a knucklehead. I actually thought he was a knucklehead, but there were some things that he actually says that I'm not going to say that I would jump in his camp, but I could see him getting elected. I could see him getting elected over Oz. I think he was a better choice, even though he is off, into some alleyway. There are certain things that I do agree with, and I do think he is a spokesman for moving the Democrats into the middle, which I think would be very helpful for them.
Let me ask you about this, Pete. You have recently written about a looming recession. There are a lot of economists they say that there are indicators in the market that suggest that is coming, and yet we also see kind of on a daily basis some of the things that Donald Trump promised during during the election season about bringing gas prices down, lowering interest rates, lowering the cost of eggs. It didn't happen in 3 days, and there was the gotcha moment related to that. But over the course of a couple of months, we have seen some of those prices come down a little bit. Why are we talking about the possibility of a recession?
Well, one of the things, when prices come down, it's not only because of, increased supply, it's also that you're decreasing demand. So to me, we are seeing a decrease in demand for certain products. You're not going to see a decrease in demand for eggs. You will never see that. No matter what they say, people are going to buy eggs. I was buying eggs at $11 a dozen. I'm going to buy them at $4 a dozen. So to me, eggs are not really a good indication of demand, supply, demand. It's just people are going to buy them, and that is it. But if you look at the housing market, and if you look at, 2 weeks ago, the airline industry all came out and said the same thing, that they were looking for their earnings to be cut or at least reduced traffic coming into the summer season, which is their big season. That tells me that they're looking at business travel being curtailed, which is a sure sign of companies cutting back, personal travel being curtailed as well. So when people aren't planning trips, they're not looking at the economy and saying, you know what, I love my job, I'm making a ton of money, and let's go to St. Martin for 2 weeks. They're not looking at it anymore. So people are mentally gearing up for, if not a recession, a very slow period or a slack period in the economy. To me, I'm more in the recession camp, and I have been since the beginning of the year, because the economy the economy runs in cycles, and I don't think President Trump is forcing this with tariffs, because I think that's a lame excuse. Um, I just think it's a natural cyclical event that happens every so often. Sometimes it's there's 8 years between recessions. Sometimes it's 3 years. I think the economy has done very, very well. I mean, I hate to say it did well under the last 2 years of Biden, but I don't think he knew it. And, and Trump inherited a pretty, he may have said it was a disaster, but I've talked to a lot of people, and there's not one person that felt the economy was a disaster. They wouldn't give Biden credit, but they would say, the economy's doing well. I need employees. I need people. I can expand. I can do this. I can do that. And they're not saying that anymore. They're not looking to expand. They're looking to maybe not cut employees, but they're not going to be hiring. So to me, the next couple of weeks, you're looking at, the unemployment numbers, you look at jobless claims, that'll start showing an indication that things are starting to slow down. There's going to be an increase, a tick up in jobless claims on Friday, I think it comes out. That's one of the things you look for. And I think that you're going to start seeing that. So I don't think it's going to be a deep recession. But I do think we will see a period sometime during the summer that's going to be very slack period. And that, a lot of slack periods, if they don't, when we had slack periods in the past, the government would spend more money. I don't think you're going to see the Trump administration spending more money.
You mentioned,
I don't think,
you mentioned tariffs a second ago, and from the time that Donald Trump started talking about tariffs leading up to Election Day to now, where some of those are going into place, there have been two camps. One, it's awful, it's going to kill us. Two, this is more of a negotiating tool. And I guess maybe a third camp that says, hey, this is something that is going to balance global trading and get the United States out from behind the eight ball. I know it's such a broad topic, but in a relatively short period of time, when you look at tariff policy for the United States with the rest of the world, what stands out for you?
Well, to me, originally, I thought it was, for Trump's idea of bringing back, manufacturing to the United States, which I completely and 100% disagree with. I don't think it will, but that's another topic. I do think this is more of a negotiating tactic. And I think that it's not I don't like tariffs. I don't think no one wins in any kind of tariff war. It ends up, causing more problems than it solves. So to me, it's not the way I would go about it. But this is Donald Trump. He does things differently. I do think it's a negotiating tactic. I do think he wants better terms for U.S. manufacturers overseas. I'm not so sure that he thinks that having tariffs is going to increase manufacturing in the U.S. It has started to, though. You've seen some indications of companies bringing back manufacturing. But to me, like a company like Mondelez, they make all of their cookies in Mexico, right? Or almost all of them. Are they going to bring back manufacturing to the U.S.? They certainly could, because they could ramp up their old factories and start producing, my Oreos, my blessed Oreos. They could produce them in the U.S. But, for them to get a 20% tariff on a $3.79 bag of, Oreos, it's going to add, what's going to add 15, 20, 30 cents to the price, or 50 cents to the price. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. So for them to bring back manufacturing, which would cost them a couple of $100 million, as opposed to taking a short hit on tariffs for the stuff they're importing, I think they'll keep importing the stuff. I don't think that that effect is going to work. But I do think that some points, when it comes to steel, aluminum, copper, and whatnot, I do think that is a negotiating ploy, and I do think that might be successful.
So if it's a small price item, it may not have enough effect to change the system, but on big ticket items, it may actually do what Trump is hoping it'll do.
On core production items like steel, aluminum, copper, titanium, all of that, I do think there will be some negotiating room, and I think that will work. But I don't think bringing back, cores. I mean, they make cores in Colorado, but manufactured items like produce, like what we have already, and coffee. Well, you can't grow coffee in the United States. So, to me, putting a tariff on coffee, I'll pay it because I drink a lot of coffee. Yeah, I don't care.
I appreciate so much you visiting. I hope we can do this again very soon. I have a question for you next time. Are we wasting our time talking about reducing the deficit? We will hold that for next time. Peter Costa, CNBC, former governor of New York Stock Exchange. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.